Jake Morrison stared at the mission orders on his screen for the third time. Another routine survey mission to the Outer Rim. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked around the bridge of the UES horizon. Okay. His crew was busy with their morning tasks. Checking systems and running diagnostics. Lisa, what's our ETA to the survey zone? Jake called out to his navigator. Lisa Carter looked up from her console. Out 6 hours, Commander. We should reach the coordinates by 1400 hours. Jake nodded. He had been commanding the horizon for 3 years now, and most of their missions were the same. Map new systems, check for resources, look for signs of alien life. They never found much of anything interesting. Space was mostly empty, filled with dead rocks and burning gas balls. Ben, anything unusual on the long-range sensors? Jake asked his science officer. Ben Rodriguez shook his head. Nothing yet, sir. Standard readings all the way to the target zone. Looks like another quiet sector. Jake stood up and walked to the main viewing screen. The stars looked the same as always. Tiny points of light scattered across the black void. He wondered sometimes why humans kept pushing farther out into space. They had plenty of worlds already. Hundreds of colonies spread across dozens of systems. But the exploration never stopped. Commander, we're approaching the survey coordinates, Lisa announced. Jake returned to his command chair. Bring us to a full stop. Let's start the usual scans. The horizon slowed from faster-than-light travel and dropped into normal space. Jake looked at the tactical display. They were at the very edge of human territory, about as far from Earth as humans had ever traveled. The nearest colony was 3 light-years away. Beginning standard survey protocol, Ben reported. Scanning for planets, asteroids, and energy signatures. Jake watched the sensor readings scroll across his screen. Everything looked normal for the first few minutes. Then Ben's voice cut through the quiet hum of the bridge. Commander, I'm getting some strange readings here. Jake leaned forward. It kinda strange? Ben frowned at his instruments. The sensors are showing the boundary coordinates, but beyond that. There's nothing? Nothing? Jake stood up. What do you mean nothing? I mean nothing, sir. No stars, no radiation, no gravitational signatures. It's like space, just ... ends. Lisa turned from her station. That can't be right. The star charts show systems continuing in that direction. Check the sensors again, Jake ordered. Maybe we have a malfunction. Ben ran a full diagnostic. All systems are working perfectly, Commander. The readings are accurate. Jake walked over to Ben's station and looked at the display himself. The scanner showed normal space readings up to a precise line. Beyond that line, the display was completely blank. Not even background radiation. Lisa, check our position. Sure, we're at the right coordinates. Lisa confirmed their location. We're exactly where we're supposed to be, Commander. Jake stared at the impossible readings. In all his years in space, he had never seen anything like this. Empty space still had something in it. Cosmic radiation, distant starlight, gravity waves, but this showed absolute nothing. Ben, launch a probe. Let's get a closer look at this boundary. Ben prepared a standard survey probe and fired it toward the strange, empty zone. The probe flew normally for several minutes, sending back data as it approached the boundary. Then suddenly, the signal stopped. Did we lose communication? Jake asked. Ben checked his instruments. No, sir. The communication system is working fine. The probe just ... stopped transmitting. Stopped transmitting. Or was destroyed. I don't know, Commander. 1 second it was there, the next second it wasn't. It's no explosion, no debris, no emergency signal. It just vanished. Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Launch another probe. It's time to program it to stop just before the boundary. The second probe flew toward the mysterious edge of space. As it approached the boundary, it sent back increasingly strange readings. The probe's instruments showed that space itself was becoming unstable. Then, just as it reached the exact boundary line, the probe disappeared. Same result, Commander, Ben reported. The probe vanished the moment it crossed the boundary. Had been in space long enough to know that things like this didn't happen. Space didn't just end. Matter didn't just disappear. There had to be some explanation. Try sending a communication signal across the boundary, Jake ordered. Ben transmitted a standard radio signal toward the empty zone. The signal simply stopped at the boundary line. No echo, no reflection, no trace that it had ever existed. Commander, Lisa said quietly, "This doesn't make any sense. According to every law of physics I know, this is impossible." Jake was thinking the same thing. He had studied astrophysics in the academy. He knew how space worked. This violated everything he had learned. Send a message to Fleet Command, Jake decided. Tell them what we've found and request instructions. Lisa sent the message through the faster-than-light communication system. While they waited for a response, Jake ordered more tests. Every probe they sent across the boundary vanished. Every signal they transmitted was absorbed by the void. It was as if the universe simply ended at that invisible line. The response from Fleet Command came faster than expected. Jake read the message with growing confusion. Return to base immediately. Discontinue all testing. Report to Admiral Stevens upon arrival. This is classified above your clearance level. Speak of this to no one. Jake stared at the message. Fleet Command knew about this. It sent his ship here knowing what they would find. Elisa set course. For Earth, maximum speed. As the horizon turned away from the mysterious boundary, Jake tried to make sense of what had happened. How could Fleet Command know about this impossible phenomenon? How long had they known? Why had they sent his ship to find it? During the journey back to Earth, Jake noticed something else strange. When he tried to discuss their discovery with other ships in the area, the communication system developed problems. Messages were garbled or lost entirely. It was as if something was preventing them from talking about what they had seen. Ben spent hours reviewing the sensor data, trying to find some explanation. Lisa checked and rechecked their navigation, wondering if they had somehow made an error, but the facts remained the same. They had found the edge of the universe, and it ended precisely at the boundary of human territory. 3 days later, the horizon arrived at Earth. Jake received new orders immediately upon docking. He was to report to a classified facility he had never heard of. His crew was reassigned to different ships, scattered across human space. The horizon itself was taken for routine maintenance that would last several months. As Jake prepared to leave his ship, he looked back at the crew. Quarters and bridge, where he had spent 3 years of his life. Something told him he would never command the horizon again. Whatever he had discovered out there on the rim was big enough to change everything. Ben approached him as he gathered his personal belongings. "Commander, what do you think is really going on?" Jake looked at his science officer. "I don't know, Ben, but I have a feeling we're about to find out." That night, Jake lay in his quarters at the spaceport, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't stop thinking about that boundary. The way space just ended, as if someone had drawn a line and said no farther. The way Fleet Command had responded. So quickly, as if they had been expecting his report. He thought about all the star charts he had studied. All the missions he had flown to the outer rim. Had other crews found the same thing? Were there more boundaries out there? Invisible walls that marked the limits of human space? Jake fell asleep with questions spinning in his mind. Tomorrow he would report to Admiral Stevens and hopefully get some answers. But deep down, he suspected that the answers would only lead to more questions, and that his life as a simple exploration commander was about to become much more complicated. Jake Morrison stood outside a building he had never seen before. The address in his orders led him to what looked like an ordinary office complex in downtown Washington. But the security guards at the entrance carried military-grade weapons, and the scanners at the door were more advanced than anything he had seen on starships. After passing through 3 separate security checkpoints, Jake found himself in an elevator that descended much deeper than any normal building should go. The elevator ride lasted over 2 minutes. When the doors finally opened, he stepped into a corridor that stretched far into the distance. Lined with doors marked only by numbers, a woman in a lab coat approached him. She was about 40 years old, with graying hair and tired eyes behind thick glasses. "Commander Morrison? I'm Dr. Helen Burke. I've been waiting to meet you." Jake shook her hand. "Doctor, can you tell me what this place is?" "My orders just said to report here." Len smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "This is Research Facility 7. We study things that officially don't exist. Follow me, please. They walked down the long corridor, passing dozens of sealed doors. Jake could hear strange humming sounds from behind some of them. Others were completely silent. How long have you been working here? Jake asked. 23 years, Helen replied. I was fresh out of graduate school when they recruited me. I thought I was going to study theoretical physics, but I had no idea what I was really signing up for. They stopped at a door marked Conference Room 12. Helen placed her hand on a scanner and the door slid open. Inside was a simple room with a table, chairs, and a large display screen on the wall. Please sit down, Helen said. We have a lot to discuss. Jake sat across from her. Dr. Burke, I found something out there that doesn't make sense. My crew and I discovered what looks like the edge of space itself, but my superiors seem to know about it already. Helen nodded slowly. Jake, can I call you Jake? What you found isn't new. We've known about the barrier phenomenon for over 200 years. Barrier phenomenon? Helen activated the display screen. It showed a three-dimensional map of human space. Jake could see all the familiar star systems, the trade routes, the colony worlds. But around the entire map was a glowing red line. This red line marks the boundary you discovered, Helen explained. It surrounds all of human territory. Every single ship that has tried to cross it has vanished. Every probe, every signal, everything. Jake stared at the map. That's impossible. Space doesn't work that way. You're right. It doesn't. But this isn't natural space, Jake. This is something else entirely. Helen changed the display to show historical data. The first deep space mission that encountered the barrier was in 2157. The ship was called the UES Pioneer. They were exploring a system about 50 light years from Earth when they found it. Just like you, they tried to cross it. The ship vanished without a trace. Jake felt his mouth go dry. What happened to the crew? Gone. No wreckage, no distress signals, no trace that they ever existed. The rescue ships that went looking for them found the same barrier. They reported back to Earth, and the government immediately classified the information. Helen showed him more data, ship after ship, probe after probe, all encountering the same mysterious boundary, all disappearing when they tried to cross it. But here's the really strange part, Helen continued. The barrier moves. Moves? Humanity expands into new star systems. The barrier expands with us. It always maintains exactly 50 light years between the furthest human settlement and the edge of the barrier. Jake looked at the map again. The red line did seem to follow the shape of human expansion. That's not possible. We thought so too. But we've been tracking it for 2 centuries. Every time humans establish a new colony, the barrier moves outward to accommodate it. Every time we abandon a world, the barrier slowly contracts. Inward. Helen pulled up another display. This one showed early attempts to study the barrier. Jake saw footage of research stations being built near the boundary. Teams of scientists trying to understand what they were dealing with. What happened to these research stations? Jake asked. The ones built too close to the barrier? They vanished. Overnight, sometimes. We'd have communication with them one day, and the next day there would be nothing. No debris, no emergency signals, no trace they had ever existed. Jake felt cold despite the warm room. How many people have we lost over the years? Thousands. Scientists, explorers, military personnel, all classified casualties. Their families were told they died in training accidents or equipment failures. Helen's voice became quieter. That's why we're so careful now. No permanent settlements within 45 light years of the barrier. No research stations within 40 light years. We learned our limits the hard way. Jake thought about his own crew. What about Ben and Lisa, my crew members? They're safe. They've been reassigned to ships that operate well within the interior of human space. They'll never go near the barrier again. And me. Helen looked at him carefully. That depends on you, Jake. We brought you here because you have a choice to make. You can return to normal service commanding ships in the inner systems. Be given a new crew and new missions. You'll never speak of what you found. and you'll live a normal career. Or you can join us. Help us study the barrier. Try to understand what it is and why it exists. But if you choose that path, you can never go back to your old life. You'll be part of a classified program that officially doesn't exist. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Dr. Burke, what do you think the barrier is? Helen turned off the display and looked directly at him. Honestly, I think it's protection. Protection from what? That's the question we've been trying to answer. For 23 years, Helen stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Jake could see that there were several stories underground. Jake, let me show you something else. She led him out of the conference room and down another corridor. They stopped at a heavy door marked Archive Room 3. Helen used her security card to open it. Inside were shelves filled with artifacts. Strange metals, crystalline structures, devices that Jake didn't recognize. All of them looked ancient. These came from worlds on the outer rim, Helen explained. Dead worlds, mostly. Civilizations that existed thousands of years ago. Jake picked up a crystal fragment. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with internal light. What happened to these civilizations? We don't know. But every one of them left behind the same message. Helen showed him to a wall covered with photographs of cave paintings, metal tablets, and stone carvings. All from different worlds, all created by different species. But Jake could see similarities in the symbols. We've found these warnings. On dozens of worlds, Helen said, our translation teams have worked for decades to decode them. The message is always the same. She pointed to a translation posted next to each image. Jake read them with growing unease. Beware the darkness beyond the light. The devourers come from the void. Stay within the protected realm. The barrier holds back the hunger. Jake set down the crystal fragment. You think the barrier is protecting us from something? I think humanity stumbled into something we don't understand, Helen replied. And I think we're very lucky to be alive. They returned to the conference room. Helen sat down across from Jake again. So what's it going to be? Commander, a quiet career in the inner systems, or the chance to help solve the greatest mystery in human history. Jake looked at the star map still glowing on the screen. All those red lines marking the limits of human space. All those vanished ships and lost crews. All those ancient warnings from dead civilizations. If I joined your program, what would I be doing? Research missions? Carefully planned expeditions to study the barrier from a safe distance? Analysis of alien artifacts? Coordination with other classified programs studying the same phenomenon? Jake made his decision. I'm in. Helen smiled, and this time it seemed genuine. Welcome to the program. Jake, I hope you're ready to have everything you thought you knew about the universe completely turned upside down. As Jake signed the security agreements and oath forms, he wondered what he was getting himself into. But he knew he couldn't walk away from this mystery. Somewhere out there, beyond the barrier that marked the edge of human space, something was waiting. And humanity's survival might depend on understanding what it was. Jake Morrison had been working with Dr. Helen Burke's team for 3 weeks when Admiral Carol Stevens finally summoned him. The message came through the facility's internal communication system at 0600 hours. Report to Level 15, Room 1501, immediately. Jake had heard about Admiral Stevens, but never met her. She was the head of Ultra Black Space Operations, a division so classified that most military officers didn't even know it existed. Helen had mentioned her only once, saying that Stevens was the person who really ran the barrier research program. Level 15 was deeper underground than Jake had ever been. The elevator took almost 5 minutes to reach it. When the doors opened, he found himself in a corridor that looked different from the rest of the facility. The walls were lined with some kind of metal he didn't recognize, and strange blue lights provided illumination. Room 1501 was larger than Jake expected. The walls were covered with display screens showing star maps, alien artifacts, and streams of data he couldn't understand. At the center of the room stood a woman in a naval uniform. She was tall, probably in her 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. Commander Morrison, she said without looking up from a datapad. I'm Admiral Stevens. Please, sit down. Jake sat in the chair across from her desk. The Admiral continued reading for another minute before setting the pad aside and looking directly at him. "Dr. Burke tells me you've adapted well to the program," Stevens said. "She says you ask good questions and don't panic when you see impossible things. Thank you, Admiral." "Don't thank me yet. What I'm about to show you is going to change how you see everything. The barrier phenomenon that Dr. Burke explained to you is just the beginning. The truth is much bigger and much more frightening." Stevens activated one of the wall displays. It showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, but this one was different from any Jake had seen before. Most of the galaxy was dark, with only a small section near one spiral arm glowing with the familiar blue dots that represented human space. "This is what the galaxy really looks like," Stevens explained. "That small blue section is human territory. Everything else is empty." Jake studied the map. "Empty. But our telescopes show stars and systems throughout the galaxy." "The telescopes show what used to be there," Stevens replied. "Stars that died out thousands of years ago. Systems that were consumed by something we're only beginning to understand." She changed the display to show archaeological data. Images of dead worlds, empty cities, and ruins that stretched across continents. "For the past 50 years, we've been sending secret expeditions to worlds beyond our territory. Not beyond the barrier, but to systems that our long-range sensors show as inhabited. Every single one of them is dead." Jake looked at the images. Some of the cities looked almost human. Others were clearly built by alien species with completely different biology. But they all shared one thing. They were all completely abandoned. "What happened to them?" Jake asked. "They were consumed," Stevens said simply. "Eaten by something that feeds on consciousness, technology, and life itself." She showed him more images. In every dead city, the research teams had found the same thing. Warning messages carved into walls, etched into metal, burned into stone. All in different alien languages, but all saying the same thing. "The Devourers come from beyond the light," Jake read from one translation. "They consume all that lives," he read from another. "Stay within the protected realm, or face the hunger that knows no end." Stevens nodded. "We found evidence of at least 40 different alien civilizations. Some were more advanced than humanity. Others were just beginning to explore space. All of them left the same warnings before they disappeared." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. How long ago did this happen? The oldest warnings date back about 12,000 years. The newest are only 3,000 years old. But they all describe the same enemy. Stevens changed the display again. This time it showed a timeline of galactic history, with markers indicating when different civilizations vanished. "It wasn't random," she explained. "The disappearances follow a pattern. The Devourers move through the galaxy systematically, consuming everything in their path. Based on the timeline, they should have reached Earth about 2,000 years ago, but they didn't." "No, and that's the real mystery." Stevens turned to face Jake directly. "Commander, what do you know about human expansion into space?" Jake thought back to his Academy history classes. The first successful, faster-than-light drive was invented in 2143. The first colony ship left Earth in 2151. That's the official history. The real history is different. Stevens pulled up classified documents that Jake had never seen before. "Humanity has been traveling in space much longer than we admit publicly." The documents showed evidence of human space travel dating back to the early 2000s. Secret projects, hidden bases, and classified missions that had been erased from public records. "The first humans to leave Earth weren't explorers," Stevens continued. "They were refugees. They were running from something, and they knew exactly what they were running from." Jake looked at the evidence. Hidden launch facilities, secret research projects, and most disturbing of all, genetic modification programs that dated back centuries. What were they running from? The same thing that consumed all those other civilizations? Somehow, some group of humans learned about the Devourers long before they were supposed to arrive. These people organized humanity's escape into space. Stevens showed him more classified files. The early space program wasn't about exploration or resources, it was about survival. Every colony was placed strategically, every expansion was carefully planned. They were building something. Building what? A defense network. Commander, the barrier that surrounds human space isn't natural. It's not something we discovered, something we created. Jake stared at her. That's impossible. Humans don't have technology that advanced. Normal humans don't, Stevens agreed. But the humans who organized our expansion into space weren't normal. They had been genetically modified specifically to create and maintain the barrier. She showed him genetic analysis reports that hurt his head to read, complex DNA sequences, protein structures, and neural patterns that were far beyond anything Jake understood. These modified humans still exist, Stevens continued. Their descendants are scattered throughout human space, usually without knowing what they are. They're the reason the barrier exists. Their consciousness literally holds reality together and keeps the devourers out. Jake was having trouble processing what he was hearing. Are you saying that some humans are different from others? Saying that some humans carry genetic markers that make them natural reality anchors? Their minds can influence the fabric of space-time itself. When enough of them are concentrated in an area, they create a stable zone that the devourers cannot penetrate. Stevens pulled up another file, this one with Jake's name on it. Commander, why do you think you were selected for that survey mission? To the barrier? Jake looked at his own genetic profile. There were markers highlighted in red, sequences that matched the patterns Stevens had just shown him. You carry the anchor genes, Jake. So did every member of your crew. Your mission wasn't random. We've been tracking people like you for generations, placing you in strategic positions throughout human space. Jake felt dizzy. You're saying I'm not entirely human? You're as human as anyone else? But you're also something more. You and people like you are humanity's greatest weapon against the devourers. Your presence literally expands the safe zone and pushes back the consuming darkness. Stevens stood up and walked to the window. Even though they were deep underground, Jake could see that it showed a view of space, somehow transmitted from the surface. The barrier around human territory isn't just protection, she explained. It's a prison. The devourers are trapped in the dark spaces between the galaxies. Held back by the collective consciousness of humanity's anchor descendants, Jake thought about all the colony worlds he had visited. All the space stations and research facilities scattered throughout human territory. How many people know about this? Less than 1,000 across all of human space. Most of the anchors don't know what they are. They live normal lives, never realizing that their presence is holding back cosmic horror. What happens if the devourers break through? Stevens was quiet for a long moment. Based on what happened to the other civilizations, humanity would have, perhaps 6 months before complete extinction. It's not just death, but complete consumption. Every human consciousness would be devoured, every trace of our existence erased. Jake looked at his genetic profile again. All those strange markers that made him different from baseline humans. What do you need me to do? Your survey mission was just the beginning, Stevens replied. We need you to return to space, but this time with full knowledge of what you're really doing. You'll command a ship crewed entirely by anchor gene carriers. Your mission will be to establish monitoring stations as close to the barrier as safely possible. She showed him specifications for a new type of space station. These aren't just observation posts, they're reinforcement nodes. Each station extends the barrier slightly, giving us more buffer space between humanity and the void. Jake Morrison stood in the laboratory deep beneath the Pentagon, staring at a holographic display that showed his own DNA. Dr. Helen Burke pointed to specific sections of the genetic code, highlighting sequences that glowed bright blue against the dark background. These are the anchor genes, Helen explained. They're not natural human DNA. Someone designed them specifically and inserted them into the human genetic code thousands of years ago. Jake studied the complex patterns. Who could have done something like this? Humans didn't have genetic engineering, technology that advanced in ancient times. Helen changed the display to show comparative genetic analysis. That's what we thought too, but look at this. The screen showed DNA samples from ancient human remains found in archaeological sites around the world. Even specimens that were over 10,000 years old showed traces of the same genetic modifications. The anchor genes have been part of humanity since before recorded history, Helen continued. Someone modified our entire species long before we developed writing, agriculture, or any kind of advanced technology. Jake felt a chill as he realized what she was suggesting. You're saying humans aren't originally from Earth? Not exactly. We think humans evolved naturally on Earth, but someone intervened in our development very early. They took primitive humans and genetically modified them to create a species capable of holding back the devourers. Dr. Burke pulled up another display showing ancient archaeological sites from around the world. Stone circles, megalithic structures, and mysterious ruins that had puzzled scientists for centuries. These weren't built by primitive humans, she said. They were built by our genetic ancestors, the ones who had the knowledge and technology. To modify human DNA, each of these sites is positioned at specific coordinates that form a global pattern. Jake looked at the map showing the locations of ancient sites. They were scattered across every continent, but when connected, they formed geometric patterns that looked almost like a circuit diagram. What kind of pattern? A planetary anchor? Network. These sites were the first reality anchors, designed to protect Earth itself from the devourers. When humans began expanding into space, we carried the same genetic modifications that allowed us to create larger networks among the stars. Helen showed him detailed scans of the ancient sites. Hidden beneath the stone structures were chambers, containing technology that was far beyond anything humans should have possessed thousands of years ago. We've been studying these sites for decades, Helen said. The technology is still partially functional. It's what taught us how the anchor networks actually work. Jake looked at the scanning data. The buried chambers contained crystalline structures that pulsed with energy, metallic devices that seemed to bend space around them. And most disturbing of all, organic components that were still alive after thousands of years. What are those organic parts? Genetic material from the original anchor humans, the ones who built these sites and modified our species. They're still connected to the network, still providing power to keep Earth protected. Jake felt sick. You mean there are people buried under these sites? Still alive? Not people as we understand them? They transformed themselves into something else, something that could survive for thousands of years to maintain the planetary defense grid. They sacrificed their humanity to save the human species. Helen changed the display to show brain scans and neural activity readings from the buried chambers. Their consciousness still exists, but it's been merged with the anchor network itself. They're aware, but they're not individual people anymore. They're part of a collective mind that spans the entire planet. Jake stepped back from the display. This is insane. You're telling me that humanity was designed as a weapon against cosmic monsters, and our ancestors turned themselves into living computers to protect us? That's exactly what I'm telling you, Helen replied. And Jake, there's more. The genetic modifications didn't just give humans the ability to create reality anchors. They also gave us something else. She pulled up a new set of genetic analysis charts. Enhanced pattern recognition, improved spatial reasoning, and most importantly, an instinctive drive to explore and expand into new territories. Jake thought about his own career, his constant desire to push further into unexplored space. You're saying our need to explore isn't natural? It's very natural, but it was designed to be natural. Humans were genetically programmed to spread throughout the galaxy as quickly as possible, establishing anchor networks wherever they went. Every colony world, every space station, every human settlement extends the protected zone a little further. Helen showed him population distribution maps of human space. Look at how we've expanded. It's not random, even without knowing about. The anchor networks humans naturally settle in patterns that maximize coverage and create overlapping fields of protection. Jake studied the maps. She was right. Human expansion followed geometric patterns that looked planned, even though no central authority had directed the colonization efforts. The genetic programming is subtle, Helen continued. Humans don't consciously know they're building a defense network. They just feel drawn to explore, to settle new worlds, to push the boundaries of known space. It's built into our DNA. Jake sat down heavily in a nearby chair. So everything I thought I knew about human nature, about our drive to explore, about our place in the universe, it's all artificial. Not artificial. Enhanced. The original human drive to explore and learn was amplified and directed by the genetic modifications. You're still human, Jake. You're just a human designed to be the best possible guardian against an existential threat. Helen walked over to another display showing current genetic distribution data. About 1 in every 50 humans carries strong anchor genes. Most of them don't know it, but they're naturally drawn to careers in space, exploration, research, or military service. They unconsciously position themselves where they can be most effective. Jake looked at the statistics. What happens to the people who don't have the anchor genes? They're still essential. Normal humans provide the population base, the culture, the civilization that's worth protecting. The anchor gene carriers are the guardians, but they're protecting something precious and irreplaceable. Helen showed him files on his former crew members. Ben Rodriguez and Lisa Carter both carry anchor genes, but not as strongly as you do. That's why they were assigned to your ship. 3 of you together created a more powerful anchor field than any of you could have managed alone. Jake remembered the easy camaraderie he had felt with his crew, the way they seemed to work together naturally. Was our friendship even real? Of course it was real. The genetic modifications don't control your personality or your emotions. They just influence certain tendencies and abilities. You genuinely liked Ben and Lisa because they're good people, not because of their DNA. Helen pulled up one final display. This one showed Jake's complete genetic profile, including sequences that hadn't been highlighted before. Jake, you're what we call a prime anchor. Less than 1% of anchor gene carriers have your specific genetic pattern. You have the ability to not just maintain reality anchors, but to actually create new ones. Jake looked at the complex genetic data. What does that mean? It means you can establish new protected zones in areas where no humans have ever been before. Most anchor carriers can only maintain existing networks. You can extend them into completely unexplored space. Helen's expression became very serious. That's why Admiral Stevens chose you for the barrier monitoring mission. You're not just going to observe the boundary between human space and the void. You're going to push it back. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. How many prime anchors are there? Currently active? Maybe a dozen throughout all of human space? Most of them don't know what they are. They live normal lives, unconsciously strengthening the networks wherever they happen to be. Helen showed him a list of names and locations. We've been tracking prime anchors for generations, but we've never tried to activate their abilities. Deliberately. You're the first one we've told the truth about what he is. Jake studied the list. The other prime anchors were scattered across human space, working as scientists, explorers, and military officers. All of them in positions where they could strengthen humanity's defenses without knowing it. What happens when you activate a prime anchor's abilities? We don't know. The genetic modifications include capabilities that have never been tested. According to the theoretical models, a fully activated prime anchor should be able to create reality fields strong enough to permanently exclude the devourers from entire star systems. Helen paused. But the energy requirements are enormous. Activating those abilities might be fatal to the anchor carrier. Jake looked at his own genetic profile one more time. All those complex sequences that made him different from baseline. Humans. All those modifications made by ancient ancestors who had sacrificed everything to give humanity a chance at survival. Dr. Burke, what happened to the other species that fought the devourers? The ones that left the warning messages? As far as we can tell, they tried to fight using technology alone. Weapons, shields, artificial intelligence systems. The devourers consumed all of it. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Guardian, watching the barrier grow larger on the main screen. His new ship was unlike anything he had commanded before. The hull was made from metals that seemed to shimmer with internal light, and the engines used technology that bent space in ways he didn't fully understand. His crew of 15 was handpicked. From anchor gene carriers throughout human space, Each of them had volunteered after learning the truth about what they were. Navigator Amy Foster had given up a promising career on Mars. Engineer Tony Walsh had left his family on Europa. Science officer Kate Murphy had abandoned her research. At the Jupiter Labs, all of them knew they might not survive the mission. Distance to barrier, 1 light year in closing. Amy reported from her station. Jake could feel something changing as they approached the boundary. The air on the bridge seemed thicker, and he noticed that the crew was moving more slowly, as if they were underwater. "Kate, what are you reading on the sensors?" Kate looked up from her instruments with a worried expression. "Commander, the space around us is becoming unstable. Reality itself is fluctuating. The closer we get to the barrier, the more the laws of physics seem to bend." Jake had been warned about this. Dr. Burke had explained that the barrier wasn't just a wall between human space and the void. It was a place where two different kinds of reality met and clashed. "Tony, how are the engines holding up?" Tony checked his engineering displays. "The reality distortions are affecting our faster-than-light drive. We're going to have to drop to normal space soon or risk tearing the ship apart." Jake nodded. "Do it. Take us out of FTL." The Guardian dropped back into normal space with a shudder that ran through the entire ship. On the main screen, Jake could see the barrier as a wall of absolute darkness that stretched in every direction. No stars, no light, nothing but empty void. "Distance to barrier, 50,000 kilometers, Amy announced. Jake felt a strange sensation in his mind. It was like hearing voices at the edge of his consciousness, whispers in languages he didn't recognize. He looked around the bridge and saw that his crew was experiencing the same thing. "Kate, are you picking up any signals?" Kate's hands were shaking as she operated her instruments. "Not signals exactly, Commander. It's more like ... thoughts. The barrier is alive somehow, and it's trying to communicate." Jake walked to the front of the bridge and placed his hand on the bulkhead. The moment he touched the ship's hull, the whispers became clearer. He could understand fragments of what they were saying. "We hunger. Give us life. Let us feed." Jake pulled his hand back quickly. "Those are the Devourers. They know we're here." The darkness beyond the barrier began to move. Shapes that were not quite visible pressed against the boundary, testing its strength. Jake could see ripples running along the wall of nothingness, like something enormous was pushing from the other side. Commander, Kate called out urgently. "The barrier is weakening. The Devourers are concentrating their efforts on this section." Jake knew what he had to do. Dr. Burke had explained the process, but hearing about it and actually doing it were very different things. He would have to activate his prime anchor abilities and extend the barrier forward, pushing the Devourers back. "Tony, begin construction of the anchor station." "Amy, position us exactly 49,000 kilometers from the current barrier position." The Guardian's advanced fabrication systems began building the anchor station in space. Robotic arms extended from the ship's hull, assembling a complex structure that looked part machine and part crystal. The station was designed to channel and amplify the reality fields that anchor gene carriers could create as the station took shape. Jake felt the pressure in his mind increasing. The Devourers knew what humanity was trying to do, and they were fighting back. The whispers became screams of hunger and rage. "Station construction complete," Tony reported. "Ready for anchor activation?" Jake walked to the special chair that had been installed on the bridge, was connected to the ship's systems, and to the anchor station by cables that pulsed with energy. When he sat down, neural interfaces would connect directly to his brain. "Kate, monitor my vital signs. If the process starts killing me, cut the connection immediately." Kate nodded, her face pale with worry. "Understood, Commander." Jake sat in the anchor chair and felt the neural interfaces slide into position. Immediately, his consciousness expanded beyond his physical body. He could sense the Guardian, the crew, the anchor station, and most importantly, the barrier itself. The barrier was not just a wall, it was a living thing, created from the combined will and consciousness of billions of humans throughout space. In time, Jake could feel the presence of every anchor gene carrier in human territory, all of them unconsciously contributing to the network that held back the void. But he could also feel the Devourers pressing against the barrier from the other side. They were vast, hungry intelligences that existed in the spaces between realities. They had consumed entire galaxies, feeding on consciousness and life until nothing remained but empty darkness. Jake began the activation process. He reached out with his enhanced consciousness and touched the barrier. The moment he made contact, power flowed through him like electricity. His awareness expanded even further. He could see the entire network of reality anchors that protected human space. Earth was at the center, still powered by the ancient guardians who had transformed themselves thousands of years ago. Lines of force stretched out from the homeworld to every human colony, creating a web of protection that spanned hundreds of light years. Jake began to push. Using his prime anchor abilities, he extended the barrier forward, claiming new space from the void. The Devourers fought back immediately, pressing against his expanded field with overwhelming force. Jake, Kate's voice seemed to come from very far away. Your neural activity is off the charts. You need to pull back. But Jake could see something. The others couldn't. Beyond the immediate darkness of the void, there were pockets of normal space. Islands of reality that the Devourers had not yet consumed. Some of them contained the ruins of civilizations that had managed to hide for a few more centuries before being found and devoured. Jake pushed harder, extending the barrier toward one of these pocket realities. If he could reach it, he could save whatever remained of those ancient civilizations. The strain was enormous. Jake felt like his mind was being torn apart by the conflicting forces of reality and void. Blood ran from his nose, and his hands clenched the arms of the anchor chair so tightly that the metal began to crack. "Commander, you have to stop," Amy shouted. "The ship's hull is starting to buckle from the reality distortions." But Jake was almost there. The pocket of normal space was just beyond his reach. He gathered every bit of his strength and made one final push. The barrier exploded outward, expanding by nearly a full light year in every direction. The pocket reality was suddenly connected to human space, protected by the anchor network. Jake had saved the ruins of an entire civilization, but the effort had cost him everything. Jake collapsed in the anchor chair, his consciousness scattered across the network he had just extended. Kate rushed to his side, checking his vital signs. "He's alive, but barely," she reported. "His neural patterns have changed completely. It's like part of his mind is still connected to the barrier." Jake opened his eyes slowly. He could still feel the network, still sense the Devourers pressing against the expanded barrier. But now he understood something that Dr. Burke and Admiral Stevens didn't know. "Kate," he whispered, "send a message to Earth. Tell them the Devourers aren't just random monsters. They're the immune system of something much larger." Kate leaned closer to hear him. "What do you mean?" "The universe itself is alive," Jake said. "With great effort, the Devourers are trying to prevent consciousness from spreading because they think awareness is a disease. They're trying to cure the universe by eliminating all thinking beings." Jake's eyes closed again, but he continued speaking. "But they're wrong. Consciousness isn't a disease. It's evolution. The universe is trying to become aware of itself through species like humanity." Over the following days, as the Guardian returned to human space, Jake recovered slowly, but he was changed. Part of his consciousness remained connected to the barrier network, making him more sensitive to threats and opportunities. The pocket reality he had saved contained the preserved knowledge of 12 different alien civilizations. Humanity now had access to technologies and ideas that would help them expand the barrier, networked even further. More importantly, they had learned that the war against the Devourers wasn't just about survival. It was about the universe's attempt to evolve beyond simple matter and energy into something capable of thought and wonder. Jake stood in Admiral Stevens' office 6 months later, looking at updated star maps that showed the expanded barrier. Human space was now larger than ever before, and new colonies were being established in the rescued pocket reality. "The Devourers are regrouping," Jake reported. "They're going to try a concentrated attack on our newest expansion. But I think we can handle it." Stevens nodded. "How many more prime anchors are we going to need?" Jake thought about the vast network of consciousness that he could now sense throughout human space.